You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius, what if I told you that the moment you stop caring is the exact moment people lose control over you? Think about it. The overthinking, the constant need for validation, the way someone's silence, opinion, or approval can hijack your mood for an entire day. Most people live trapped there, reacting, chasing, explaining, proving. And without realizing it, they hand their power away. Stoicism teaches something dangerous to the wrong people. Detachment is dominance, not coldness, not indifference, but emotional self-command. When you stop caring about being liked, feared, or understood, something shifts. Suddenly, manipulation stops working. Provocation feels hollow. Disrespect loses its sting. And the very people who once controlled your emotions are left confused because they no longer have access to you. This video breaks down why not caring is one of the strongest psychological positions a man can occupy, and how to apply it without becoming bitter, arrogant, or disconnected from the world. We'll expose the subtle ways people pull your emotional strings, and how Stoic wisdom cuts those strings cleanly. Watch this till the very end. The final principle ties everything together, and if you apply it correctly, you'll never be emotionally controlled the same way again. Number 1. Detachment removes emotional leverage. Detachment removes emotional leverage because it quietly takes away the fuel that keeps unhealthy dynamics alive. Power over you only exists where there is reaction. The moment you stop gripping every outcome, every word, every mood swing, something shifts. You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You simply feel less pulled, less hooked, less desperate to control or be controlled. And in that space, leverage collapses. Not with drama, but with silence. Not with force, but with steadiness. You begin to notice how often your emotional energy was being traded away for approval, reassurance, or relief from discomfort. Detachment doesn't make you cold, it makes you sovereign. Most emotional leverage works the same way. Someone senses what moves you, what rattles you, what you're afraid of losing. Attention, validation, certainty, control, affection. When those things matter too much, they become pressure points. And pressure points invite manipulation, even unintentionally. The Stoics warned about this centuries ago. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by the things you desire." That's not a call to want nothing. It's a call to want wisely. To stop handing the steering wheel of your inner world to forces outside you. Detachment starts when you stop arguing with reality. When you accept that people will act according to their nature, not your hopes. That moods fluctuate, that silence happens, that approval comes and goes. The more you resist these facts, the more leverage they gain over you. You tense up, you chase, you overthink, you replay conversations in your head trying to fix what was never fully in your control to begin with. Detachment says, "I see this clearly and I don't need to wrestle it." That clarity alone is power. Here's the subtle part most people miss. Detachment is not emotional numbness. You still feel, you still care. But you stop outsourcing your stability. You no longer need others to behave a certain way for you to be okay. And when you reach that point, emotional leverage disappears because there's nothing left to pull on. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Not someday. Now, this moment." Think about how often your peace has been tied to anticipation, waiting for a message, waiting for clarity, waiting for reassurance. That waiting creates dependency, and dependency creates leverage. Detachment breaks that loop. Instead of hovering mentally around what you can't control, you return to what you can. Your breath, your posture, your next action, your standards. You stop living in reaction mode. You start living in alignment. This is where practice matters. Detachment is not an idea you understand once. It's a habit you reinforce daily. Start with noticing emotional spikes, the rush of irritation, the wave of anxiety, the pull to explain yourself when you weren't misunderstood. In those moments, pause, literally pause, take one slow breath and ask yourself, what am I trying to control right now? Don't judge the answer, just observe it. Awareness weakens emotional leverage instantly because it brings unconscious patterns into the light. Another exercise is intentional non-reaction, not forever, just for short windows. When something triggers you, delay your response by 10 minutes, then 30, then a few hours. You'll notice how many urges dissolve on their own. What felt urgent starts to feel optional. Seneca wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Every delayed reaction is a small act of mastery. You're training your nervous system to learn that not every feeling requires action. Detachment also grows when you stop narrating your emotions to yourself. You don't need to mentally announce, "I'm disrespected," or "this is unfair," or "this shouldn't be happening." Those stories amplify emotional charge. Instead, describe facts, neutral facts. This happened. This was said. This feeling arose. Facts ground you. Stories entangle you. The less you dramatize internally, the less leverage external events have over you. There's also a powerful daily practice the Stoics used, negative visualization, not to be pessimistic but to loosen attachment. Briefly imagine losing what you cling to emotionally, not to scare yourself, but to remind yourself you would still exist, still breathe, still move forward. When you do this calmly, attachment softens, gratitude deepens, fear shrinks. You stop acting as if loss would end you. And once fear loosens its grip, leverage fades. You'll notice something else as detachment strengthens. People respond differently to you, not because you changed them, but because you changed your posture toward the world. You're calmer, less reactive, harder to provoke. You don't over-explain, you don't chase closure, you don't beg for certainty. This isn't indifference, it's self-respect in motion. And self-respect is quietly intimidating, not loud, not aggressive, just immovable. Make this practical. Every morning, set one intention. Today, I will not surrender my emotional state to things I cannot control. Write it down. Repeat it before difficult interactions. When tension arises, remind yourself, this feeling is information, not a command. You are allowed to feel without obeying. That distinction changes everything. At night, reflect briefly. Where did you react automatically? Where did you pause? Where did you reclaim control? Don't criticize yourself. Study yourself. Growth happens faster when curiosity replaces self-blame. Marcus Aurelius used reflection not as punishment but as calibration. You're doing the same. Detachment removes emotional leverage because it teaches you a radical truth. You don't need to win every moment to live well. You don't need to be understood to be grounded. You don't need control to be safe. When you internalize this, the invisible strings fall away. You stand on your own feet, calm, awake, unmoved by what once pulled you off balance. And from that place, you don't withdraw from life. You engage more cleanly, more honestly, with fewer hidden bargains and silent expectations. You choose your responses. You choose your standards. You choose your peace. That is the kind of power no one can take from you because it was never theirs to begin with. Number 2, indifference disrupts manipulation. Indifference is not coldness. It's not apathy. It's not pretending you don't feel. It's something sharper, quieter, and far more disruptive than anger or resistance. Manipulation feeds on reaction. It needs your pulse to rise, your thoughts to race, your emotions to flare. The moment you stop supplying that fuel, the entire mechanism begins to sputter. You don't have to confront, you don't have to explain, you don't have to win, you simply refuse to be pulled. And that refusal, calm and steady, changes everything. Think about how manipulation actually works. It's rarely loud. It's subtle pressure, emotional hooks, implied threats, guilt, urgency, and the promise that if you just react the right way, the tension will ease. Manipulation wants you to care too much, too quickly, and about the wrong things. It wants access to your inner world. Indifference shuts that door, not by slamming it, but by quietly closing it and locking it from the inside. When you stop caring about provoking signals, about baited comments, about manufactured drama, you deny manipulation its entry point. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Indifference is that realization made visible. Here's the part most people miss. Reacting feels powerful, but it actually hands control away. The manipulator doesn't need to dominate you physically or verbally. They just need to steer your attention. Once they can do that, they can predict you, rush you, and exhaust you. Indifference disrupts this because it's unpredictable. There's no spike to exploit, no emotional surge to redirect. When you respond with steadiness instead of urgency, with neutrality instead of defense, the script collapses. Not dramatically, quietly. And that quiet is unsettling to anyone who relies on control. This isn't about becoming passive, it's about becoming selective. Stoicism never taught emotional numbness, it taught emotional sovereignty. Epictetus was clear. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Indifference is a disciplined reaction. You still perceive what's happening. You still understand intent. You just choose not to let it move you. That choice is active, not weak. It takes more strength to stay centered than to explode or explain yourself into exhaustion. You begin to notice something interesting when you practice this. Manipulation loses its rhythm. Pressure without reaction feels awkward. Emotional hooks without emotional response hang uselessly in the air. The other side may escalate, not because you're wrong, but because their usual tools aren't working. This is where most people panic and re-engage. Don't. Seneca warned that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Indifference collapses imagined consequences. It brings you back to what's actually happening in this moment, which is usually far less threatening than your mind was led to believe. Adopting indifference as a habit starts internally. You stop narrating every interaction as a test of your worth. You stop treating every provocation as something that demands a reply. You remind yourself again and again that your peace is not a debate. One practical exercise is this. When you feel the urge to react, pause and silently ask, "Is this within my control?" If it's not, let it pass without commentary. No internal argument, no rehearsal, just release. This single question, repeated daily, trains your nervous system to disengage from manipulation before it gains traction. Another practice is emotional fasting. For a set period each day, decide that you will not mentally replay conversations, interpret hidden meanings, or plan responses. When your mind tries, gently redirect it. This builds the muscle of non-attachment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Indifference ensures you don't mirror manipulative behavior by becoming reactive, defensive, or obsessive. You stay aligned with your own values, not theirs. It's important to understand that indifference doesn't mean you don't care about outcomes that truly matter. It means you don't care about control games. You don't care about being misunderstood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You don't care about emotional traps designed to drain your energy. This distinction matters. When your care is focused, it becomes powerful. When it's scattered, it becomes exploitable. You'll also need to practice internal boundaries. Manipulation often continues long after the interaction ends, inside your head. That's where it does its real damage. Train yourself to notice when your thoughts are looping around someone else's agenda. When you catch it, label it plainly. This is not useful. Then return your attention to something concrete, your breath, your posture, the task in front of you. This isn't avoidance, it's redirection. Epictetus advised, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Indifference is embodiment. As this becomes habitual, something shifts in how you carry yourself. You speak less, but with more weight. You respond slower, but with clarity. You stop trying to prove, convince, or defend. And paradoxically, people who once tried to manipulate you begin to lose interest. Not because you fought them, but because there's nothing left to grab onto. Power dynamics dissolve when one side refuses to play. There will be moments when indifference feels uncomfortable. Your ego may protest. It will whisper that silence looks like weakness, that disengagement looks like loss. That's old conditioning talking. Stoicism reminds you that dignity is internal. Seneca said, "A man is as miserable as he thinks he is." When you stop assigning meaning to manipulation, it stops meaning anything at all. To strengthen this habit, end each day with reflection. Ask yourself where you reacted unnecessarily and where you held your center. No judgment, just observation. This builds awareness, and awareness builds choice. Over time, indifference becomes less of an effort and more of a baseline. You no longer have to force it, it's simply how you move through the world. When you stop caring in this way, you don't shrink, you expand. You reclaim mental space, emotional energy, and time. Manipulation thrives in chaos and urgency. Indifference introduces calm, and calm dismantles control, not loudly, not aggressively, but completely. Number 3, silence replaces reaction. Silence is not emptiness. It's not weakness. It's not you losing or backing down. Silence is a deliberate choice to stop feeding what drains you. Most people think power lives in louder words, sharper comebacks, faster replies. You've been trained to believe that if you don't react, you're invisible, but the opposite is true. When you choose silence, you take control of the space where manipulation usually thrives. You stop being predictable. You stop being reactive. You stop handing over your emotional steering wheel. And suddenly, the dynamic shifts. Not because you argued better, but because you didn't argue at all. You already know how exhausting constant reaction feels. Every provocation pulls you out of yourself. Every explanation costs energy. Every defense ties your worth to someone else's opinion. Silence cuts that loop. It ends the transaction. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been." That choice begins the moment you decide not to respond on impulse. Silence is the pause where that choice lives. It's where you reclaim authorship over your inner world instead of letting external noise write your script. Reaction is automatic. Silence is intentional. Reaction is driven by emotion. Silence is driven by self-respect. When you react, you confirm that whatever was said or done has access to you. When you stay silent, you deny that access. You're not suppressing yourself. You're refining yourself. You're telling your nervous system that not every stimulus deserves a response. Epictetus reminded his students, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Silence is how you interrupt that judgment before it spirals into action you later regret. This is where silence becomes powerful, not passive. It creates asymmetry. Most people operate on expectation. Say something sharp, get a reaction, push a button, watch it light up. Silence breaks that expectation. It introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is uncomfortable for anyone used to control. You don't need to announce boundaries when your behavior already enforces them. You don't need to explain your growth when your calm exposes their chaos. Silence doesn't argue, it observes. It waits, and in waiting it lets truth surface without interference. There's also something deeply grounding about choosing silence for yourself, not for effect. You're not doing it to prove a point. You're doing it to protect your mind. Seneca warned, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have." Extend that idea inward. It's in your power not to want the last word, not to want validation, not to want to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. Silence frees you from that hunger, and once that hunger fades, so does their leverage. At first, silence will feel uncomfortable. Your body will itch to respond. Your thoughts will rehearse speeches you never give. That's normal. You've been conditioned to equate response with relevance. But relevance doesn't come from noise. It comes from presence. Each time you choose silence, you strengthen the muscle of restraint. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you build distance between stimulus and response. That distance is freedom. Viktor Frankl called it the space where your power lies, but the Stoics lived it centuries earlier through disciplined quiet. Use silence as a daily practice, not a dramatic gesture. Start small. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, don't. When you want to correct someone's perception of you, don't. When you're tempted to defend your intentions, pause, breathe. Let the urge pass. Tell yourself, "I don't need to be understood to be at peace." Write that sentence down if you need to. Repeat it until it lands. This isn't avoidance, it's discernment. You're choosing where your energy goes instead of letting it leak everywhere. Another practice is to sit with discomfort without narrating it. No inner commentary, no mental rebuttals, just sensation, just breath. The Stoics trained themselves to endure internal turbulence without acting on it. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Silence is how you become that cliff. Not rigid, steady, unmoved by every passing wave. You can also use silence to reset your internal tempo. Before responding to anything emotionally charged, count 10 slow breaths. Not to calm down for someone else's sake, but to come back to yourself. Ask one quiet question: does responding serve my character? If the answer isn't a clear yes, silence is your answer. Over time, this rewires how you experience pressure. You stop feeling rushed to perform. You stop chasing closure. You start trusting your inner authority. There's a subtle confidence that grows when you don't rush to fill every gap. Silence signals that you're comfortable with yourself, that you don't need constant affirmation, that you can let moments pass without forcing meaning onto them. This is why silence feels unsettling to people who rely on reaction. It reflects something they're not ready to face, their dependence on your attention. When you remove that, you're not punishing anyone, you're simply opting out. And here's the quiet truth most people miss: silence sharpens your discernment. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. You notice patterns, you notice tone. You notice who escalates when ignored and who respects your quiet. You gain clarity without confrontation. Epictetus would call this living in accordance with nature, seeing things as they are, not as your emotions color them. Silence clears the lens. Adopt this as a habit, not a tactic. Let silence be your default and words your deliberate exception. Speak when it aligns with your values, not when it soothes your anxiety. Speak when it builds, not when it burns. And when in doubt, return to quiet. There is immense strength in being unprovable, in being unreachable to chaos, in knowing that you don't owe the world a reaction just because it demands one. When you stop caring enough to react, you start caring enough to protect your inner life. Silence becomes your shield, your filter, your quiet declaration of independence. You're not withdrawing from life. You're stepping into mastery over yourself. And that is the kind of power no one can take from you. Number 4, boundaries become non-negotiable when you stop caring about being liked, approved of, or constantly understood. Something quiet but powerful happens inside you. Your boundaries stop being suggestions. They stop being flexible based on someone else's mood, expectations, or pressure. They become non-negotiable, and not in a loud, aggressive way, not with speeches or explanations. They become firm simply because you finally decide that your inner state matters more than keeping the peace. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop betraying your own limits just to avoid discomfort. That is where real power returns to you. A boundary is not something you ask permission to have. It's not a request. It's a line you draw because you've decided what you will and won't tolerate. Most people struggle with boundaries because they're still emotionally invested in how others react to them. You might say you have standards, but the moment someone pushes back, guilt creeps in. Doubt whispers. You start justifying, explaining, softening your stance. That's caring too much. And the Stoics were clear about this trap. Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. In other words, the moment you choose your principles over approval, some people won't like it. And that's not a problem. That's the price of self-respect. When boundaries become non-negotiable, you no longer argue about them in your head. You don't rehearse conversations. You don't prepare defenses. You don't try to make your limits sound reasonable enough to be accepted. You simply live by them. If something crosses the line, you disengage, calmly, cleanly, without resentment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That includes the option of not engaging, not reacting, not bending. You don't owe emotional access to anyone who disregards your limits. Silence, distance, and consistency do the work for you. This shift requires a new habit, choosing internal alignment over external harmony. That's hard at first. You've likely been conditioned to believe that being good means being accommodating, that saying no is selfish. That holding a line will cost you connection, but Stoicism flips this entirely. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." Freedom isn't loud rebellion, it's the quiet refusal to abandon yourself. When you stop caring about managing other people's emotions, your boundaries stop wobbling. They stabilize, they hold. Notice how much energy you waste when your boundaries are negotiable. You feel drained because you're constantly monitoring reactions. You adjust your behavior to avoid friction. You tolerate small violations, then resent them later. This is not strength. This is self-erosion. Non-negotiable boundaries remove that drain. They simplify your life. You don't need to control outcomes anymore. You control your response. That's it. And that's enough. Epictetus again. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Your boundary is in your power. Other people's reactions are not. You don't need dramatic declarations. You don't need ultimatums. Non-negotiable boundaries are boring, repetitive, consistent. You act the same way every time the line is crossed. No emotional spikes. No explanations layered with hope that they'll finally understand. Understanding is optional. Compliance is irrelevant. What matters is that you honor your own word to yourself. The moment you do that consistently, people adjust or they fade. Either outcome serves your peace. There's a subtle confidence that grows when you live this way. You stop scanning for validation. You stop overgiving to earn safety. You stop bargaining. And ironically, this is when others sense your strength. Not because you demand respect, but because you're no longer available for disrespect. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Boundaries are not punishment, they are self-maintenance. You're not trying to teach anyone a lesson. You're simply refusing to participate in dynamics that cost you your calm. If you want to make this real, start with a daily internal exercise. Each morning, quietly define one internal line you will not cross that day. Not something dramatic, something simple. A decision about your time, your energy, your attention. Commit to it privately. Then observe how often your mind tries to renegotiate it later. That urge is where growth happens. Don't fight it. Don't analyze it, just notice it and hold the line. This trains self-trust. Another practice, rehearse non-reaction. When you feel the impulse to explain yourself, pause, count your breath, let the silence stretch. You're not being rude, you're being sovereign. Seneca advised, no man is hurt but by himself. Most emotional harm comes from over-engagement. Practice stepping back mentally. You don't need to win the moment, you need to keep your inner order intact. You can also journal one simple question at the end of the day. Where did I compromise a boundary today to avoid discomfort? No judgment, no shame, just awareness. Stoicism isn't about perfection. It's about progress through clarity. The more honest you are with yourself, the firmer your boundaries become tomorrow. As you stop caring about being perceived as easy, kind, or agreeable, you become something far more valuable, stable, predictable in your standards, unmovable in your values. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. And clarity is kindness to yourself first. When boundaries become non-negotiable, you no longer leak power through emotional bargaining. You stand, you choose, you move forward lighter. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You just need the courage to stop caring about the reactions that come with it. Number 5, approval loses its value. Approval only has value because you were taught to treat it like currency. You learned early, quietly, repeatedly, that nods, smiles, praise, and acceptance meant safety. That disapproval meant risk. So you adapted. You adjusted your tone, softened your edges, edited your thoughts, delayed your truth. None of this happened because you were weak. It happened because you were human. But at some point, without realizing it, you outsourced your sense of worth. You started checking yourself against invisible scales. Am I liked enough? Am I impressive enough? Am I doing this the right way? And the more you chased approval, the more power it seemed to have over you. Here's the shift that changes everything. Approval doesn't actually add value to you. It only feels that way when you forget who sets the price. When you stop caring about approval, something subtle but radical happens. The noise drops, the pressure eases. You realize how much of your mental energy was spent anticipating reactions that never truly mattered. Marcus Aurelius warned about this long ago when he wrote, "I do my duty, other things trouble me not." That line isn't cold or dismissive, it's freeing. It's a reminder that your responsibility is to act with integrity, not to manage how your actions are received. Approval is external, temporary, unstable. Today it's given freely, tomorrow it's withheld without explanation. If your peace depends on it, your peace is never secure. Think about how approval works. It's conditional by design. It fluctuates based on moods, expectations, unspoken rules, and other people's unresolved needs. You can do everything right and still not receive it. Or you can receive it today and lose it tomorrow for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Epictetus made this painfully clear. If you want to be invincible, make sure that no one can ever hurt you by what they say or do. He wasn't saying words don't sting. He was saying they only wound when you grant them authority. Approval hurts you only when you treat it like proof of your value. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Craving approval is a form of self-distrust. It's the quiet belief that your own judgment isn't enough, that you need someone else to confirm that you're on the right path. And once you see that, you can begin to change it, not by becoming indifferent or arrogant, but by becoming anchored. Stoicism doesn't ask you to stop caring altogether. It asks you to care about the right things: character, effort, alignment with your values. The rest is background noise. When approval loses its value, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop diluting your thoughts before you've even spoken them. You stop living in rehearsal mode. There's a steadiness that replaces the old anxiety. You speak because it's honest, not because it will be applauded. You act because it's right, not because it will be rewarded. Seneca captured this beautifully. If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to opinion, you will never be rich. Opinion includes approval, and chasing it is a kind of poverty no amount of praise can fix. This doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one day immune to validation. You train yourself into it, quietly, daily, one decision at a time. Start by noticing how often you mentally scan for reactions, how often you replay conversations, how often you adjust future behavior to avoid imagined disapproval. Don't judge yourself for it, just observe. Awareness is the first break in the chain. Once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Here's a simple practice you can do without anyone knowing. When you feel the urge to seek approval, internally or externally, pause and ask yourself one question. Would I still choose this if no one ever acknowledged it? Sit with the discomfort that follows. That discomfort is where your independence is being forged. Don't rush to soothe it. Let it teach you. Over time, your nervous system learns that nothing bad happens when approval does arrive. You're still here, still intact, still capable. Another exercise. At the end of the day, write down one action you took that aligned with your values, regardless of how it was received. Don't include outcomes. Don't include reactions, just the action and the intention behind it. This retrains your mind to reward integrity instead of applause. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Notice what's missing there. No mention of being liked. No concern for approval. Just right and wrong, true and false. As approval loses its grip, you may notice resistance, internal and external. Parts of you that were built around being agreeable may panic. That's normal. You're dismantling an old survival strategy, but you're replacing it with something stronger, self-respect. And self-respect doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as calm, as clarity, as the ability to sit alone with your choices without needing them validated. There's a quiet confidence that comes from this shift. Not loud, not performative, just steady. You stop explaining yourself so much. You stop over-justifying. You stop bending your spine to fit into rooms that were never meant to hold you. And paradoxically, when approval stops being your goal, it often shows up anyway, but by then it doesn't own you. It's just feedback, neutral, optional. Keep this final practice close. When you catch yourself wanting approval, repeat this to yourself. This is not in my control. Then redirect your focus to what is, your effort, your intention, your conduct. That single reframe is Stoicism in action. You're not rejecting the world. You're reclaiming yourself from it. Approval loses its value the moment you stop using it as a mirror. You were never meant to see yourself through other people's eyes. You were meant to act, to choose, to live in accordance with what you know to be right. Do that consistently, and you won't need permission to stand firmly in your own life. Number 6, control shifts back to you when you stop caring in the way that drains you. Something quiet but profound happens. Control slides back into your hands. Not all at once. Not with fireworks. It returns the way strength usually does. Subtly, steadily, the moment you stop begging the world to treat you gently and start deciding how you will respond to it. You begin to notice that control was never about managing other people's moods, reactions, or approval. That was the illusion. Real control has always been about authorship, about who writes the script inside your head when things don't go your way. The instant you loosen your grip on outcomes you can't command, you tighten your grip on yourself. And that changes everything. You've been taught, indirectly, that caring deeply is the same as being invested, responsible, mature. But the Stoics saw a sharper distinction. Epictetus was blunt. Some things are up to us and some things are not. Most of your suffering comes from confusing the two. When you stop caring about what isn't yours to govern, opinions, reactions, shifting loyalties, you reclaim the energy that was leaking out of you every day. That energy doesn't vanish. It comes home. It becomes clarity. It becomes choice. It becomes restraint. You start acting instead of reacting. You stop being dragged by invisible strings and start standing where you are, firmly. Control returning to you doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you become deliberate. You stop handing over your nervous system to external triggers. You stop letting someone else's approval determine your inner weather. You stop negotiating with chaos. Instead, you decide what deserves access to your attention and what does not. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That isn't poetic comfort, it's a practical instruction. When you internalize it, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how will I meet this? One question weakens you. The other puts you back in the chair. As control returns, you begin to feel space where there used to be urgency, silence where there used to be mental noise. You notice how often you rush to explain yourself, to justify your feelings, to correct misunderstandings that didn't actually threaten your values. When you stop caring about winning every emotional exchange, you win something larger: composure. And composure is power that doesn't need to announce itself. Seneca wrote, "He is powerful who has himself in his power." Read that slowly. Not who dominates others, not who persuades crowds, who has himself. That's the shift you're making. You're no longer outsourcing your sense of control to people who don't even know they're holding it. This change asks you to build new habits, not dramatic gestures. One of the most important is learning to pause before you respond internally. Not outwardly, internally. The moment something pulls at you, you practice a brief interruption. You ask yourself, is this within my control, or is my reaction the only thing here that truly belongs to me? That single question is a lever. Pull it often enough and the machinery of your mind starts to rearrange itself. You stop chasing relief and start practicing command. You stop needing closure and start creating steadiness. This is not suppression, it's selection. You are choosing where your effort goes. Another habit is reclaiming authorship over your attention. Attention is where control lives. Whatever you repeatedly attend to trains you, so you practice narrowing it. When your mind drifts toward rumination, you bring it back to intention. When it spirals into imagined outcomes, you return it to present action. Marcus Aurelius framed it as discipline of thought. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. You don't wait for thoughts to improve on their own. You curate them, gently, persistently. You replace the reflex to worry with the practice of alignment. What would someone who governs themselves think right now? Then you think that. You also practice emotional self-containment, not isolation. Containment. There's a difference. Containment means you allow emotions to exist without letting them seize the controls. You feel without flooding. You observe without obeying. This is deeply Stoic. Epictetus urged his students to see impressions as just impressions, not commands. When a feeling arises, you name it, then you step back. You remind yourself that emotions are data, not dictators. This creates a surprising sense of freedom. You're no longer afraid of feeling strongly because you trust yourself not to be ruled by it. Control isn't about numbing, it's about stewardship. A practical exercise here is the daily rehearsal of loss of control, done mentally, calmly, without drama. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum. You imagine disruptions briefly, then return to center. Not to scare yourself, but to train resilience. The point isn't the imagined difficulty. The point is practicing the thought, I can meet this without losing myself. Over time, your mind learns that control doesn't disappear when comfort does. It adapts, it steadies, it remains yours. Another exercise is redefining success inwardly. Instead of measuring your day by outcomes, you measure it by alignment. Did you act according to your principles? Did you restrain unnecessary reactions? Did you keep your word to yourself? Seneca warned that chasing external validation makes you a hostage. When you stop caring about applause and start caring about integrity, control returns in a durable form. No one can take it because no one gave it to you. As this shift deepens, you'll notice a quieter confidence. You're no longer trying to prove that you're unbothered. You simply are. You're no longer rehearsing arguments that will never happen. You're present, you're choosing, you're firm without being rigid, calm without being passive. This is what it feels like when power stops leaking outward and starts circulating inward. Not loud, not flashy, just grounded. So take responsibility for what is truly yours. Your judgments, your attention, your effort, your character. Release the rest without resentment. Practice pausing. Practice choosing. Practice governing your inner life with the same seriousness you once gave to managing external outcomes. Over time, you'll realize something liberating. When you stop caring in the ways that weaken you, no one loses anything, but you gain yourself. And once control is back where it belongs, it stays there. Number 7, respect follows self-control. Respect doesn't arrive when you demand it, chase it, or explain yourself into exhaustion. It shows up quietly when you learn to govern yourself. That's the part most people miss. You're taught to manage impressions, to control outcomes, to say the right things at the right time. But respect doesn't respond to cleverness. It responds to restraint. The moment you stop reacting to every provocation, stop leaking your energy into every opinion, stop needing to be understood, something shifts. You feel it first, a tightening of your inner world, a steadiness. And others feel it too, even if they can't explain why. Self-control is not suppression, it's selection. It's you deciding what deserves access to your attention and what doesn't. And when you make that decision consistently, respect follows like a shadow. You don't earn respect by being loud with your emotions. You earn it by being selective with them. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned that, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That line isn't about humiliation. It's about restraint. It's about not rushing to defend your image every time it's questioned. When you pause instead of snapping back, when you choose silence instead of performance, you demonstrate something rare, command over yourself. And self-command is magnetic. People may not like it at first, some will test it, others will misunderstand it, but over time they adjust, because they sense you are not easily moved. You are not ruled by impulse, approval, or irritation. You are ruled by choice. This is where power quietly accumulates, not the loud kind, the grounded kind. The kind that doesn't need validation to exist. When you stop letting moods dictate your behavior, you stop being predictable. When you stop reacting on cue, you stop being manipulable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That strength isn't dramatic, it's calm. It's the ability to feel an emotion fully without being dragged by it, to notice anger without becoming it, to experience desire without being controlled by it, to feel dismissed without scrambling to regain approval. That's where respect is born, not in dominance over others, but in discipline over yourself. You don't need to announce your boundaries when your behavior enforces them. Think about that. If you constantly explain what you will and won't tolerate, you're still negotiating. Self-control removes the need for negotiation. You don't argue with disrespect. You don't chase clarity. You don't over-invest in being seen correctly. You simply adjust your presence. You pull back. You slow down. You choose less. And that choice speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. People begin to notice that access to you is not automatic. It's earned through consistency and mutual regard. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. There's a quiet confidence that emerges when you stop outsourcing your emotional regulation. You no longer need others to behave a certain way for you to feel centered. You don't need constant reassurance to feel solid. You don't need to win every exchange. This is where respect deepens, because people intuitively respect those who are not desperate for control. Seneca put it simply, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here isn't about confrontation. It's about resisting the urge to react. It's about tolerating discomfort without immediately trying to escape it. It's about letting silence do the work. When you can sit with unease without flinching, you signal strength. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Self-control will cost you some relationships, some dynamics, some attention. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your restraint removes the old incentives. When you stop over-giving, over-explaining, over-responding, certain patterns collapse. That's not loss. That's recalibration. Respect doesn't coexist with chaos. It requires structure. And structure starts internally. You decide what you engage with. You decide how quickly you respond. You decide how much emotional energy something deserves. These small decisions, repeated daily, reshape how others relate to you. If you want to practice this, start small and private. No announcements, no dramatic shifts. The first exercise is pause. When something triggers you, don't respond immediately. Count 10 slow breaths. Feel the urge to act without obeying it. Notice how quickly emotions rise and fall when you don't fuel them. The second exercise is subtraction. Reduce your reactions by half. Not your care, not your values, your reactions. Say less, explain less. Let gaps exist. The third is alignment. Before you speak or act, ask yourself one question. Does this come from control or from clarity? If it's control, wait. If it's clarity, proceed calmly. Over time, this rewires you. Another practice is to detach your self-worth from immediate outcomes. You don't need every interaction to go your way. You don't need to be liked in the moment. You don't need agreement to feel grounded. Repeat this internally until it becomes muscle memory. The Stoics trained for this daily, reminding themselves that external reactions are not theirs to govern. What is yours is your conduct, your tone, your timing, your restraint. When those are solid, respect becomes a byproduct, not a goal. You'll notice something subtle as you continue. Your presence changes. You become harder to provoke, easier to trust, and impossible to rush. People start measuring their words around you, not because you intimidate them, but because you don't reward nonsense with energy. You don't chase intensity. You embody composure. And composure carries weight. It always has. It always will. In a world addicted to reaction, self-control stands out as authority. So stop trying to be respected. Start being disciplined. Stop explaining yourself into exhaustion. Start conserving your energy. Stop reacting to everything. Start choosing deliberately. Respect doesn't need to be demanded when it's invited by your conduct. Govern yourself well and the world will adjust. Not loudly, not instantly, but inevitably. Number 8. Attention is no longer accessible. When attention is no longer accessible, something quiet but irreversible happens inside you. You stop feeding what once fed on you. You stop handing over the one currency that made their presence feel larger than it really was. Attention is not passive. It is energy. It is endorsement. It is time sliced out of your life and placed somewhere else. And the moment you decide, consciously and repeatedly, that your attention belongs to you again, the grip loosens. Not through force, through absence. You don't need to fight what no longer has access to your mind. You don't need to argue with what you no longer invite into your inner space. When attention is withdrawn, power starves. This is why Stoic thinkers spoke so often about governance of the mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." What he was really saying is that attention is the gate. Whatever passes through it gets to influence your emotional climate. Whatever stays outside fades, no matter how loud it once seemed. You've been trained, subtly, to believe that attention must be reactive. That if something provokes you, you must respond. That if someone pulls at your emotions, you owe them your mental presence. But that belief is optional. You are allowed to disengage. You are allowed to go still. You are allowed to say internally, "This no longer deserves my focus." And when you do, something surprising happens. The emotional noise dies down, not instantly, but steadily. Like a room going quiet after a door closes. Attention creates importance. That's the part most people miss. Things feel powerful because you keep circling them in your mind. You replay, reframe, revisit. You feed them through thought, imagination, and anticipation. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Judgment requires attention. Without sustained focus, judgments weaken. The emotional charge drains away. What once felt heavy starts to feel distant, even small. This isn't about suppression. Suppression is still attention, just clenched. This is about redirection, about choosing again and again where your awareness rests. When you stop checking, stop scanning, stop mentally monitoring what no longer aligns with you, you reclaim space. That space doesn't stay empty. It fills with calm, with clarity, with a sense of internal authority that doesn't need to announce itself. Think of attention as a habit, not a trait. Habits can be retrained. At first, your mind will wander back to old focal points. That's normal. Don't criticize yourself for that. Simply notice it and gently remove your attention again. Over time, the pull weakens. Neural pathways that were once overused start to quiet down. This is discipline without aggression, control without tension. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Imagination is fueled by attention. When attention is unavailable, imagined scenarios lose momentum. Worry collapses without rehearsal. Rumination can't survive without an audience. And when you stop attending to every emotional impulse, you begin to experience a different kind of freedom. Not the loud, dramatic kind, the grounded kind. The kind that doesn't need validation. Here's a simple but demanding practice. Several times a day, pause and ask yourself, where is my attention right now? Not where should it be? Where is it actually resting? If the answer points toward anxiety, resentment, or old emotional loops, don't judge it. Just withdraw. Bring your focus back to your breath, your posture, or the task directly in front of you. Do this repeatedly. This trains your mind to obey you instead of the other way around. Another exercise, decide in advance what deserves your attention. Not everything, a short list. Your values, your daily work, your physical state, your inner discipline. When something tries to pull you outside that list, you don't need to wrestle with it. You simply don't open the door. This is how boundaries are enforced internally, not through confrontation but through consistency. You can also practice deliberate non-engagement. When a thought arises that once would have consumed you, acknowledge it briefly and let it pass without commentary. No analysis, no storytelling, no emotional investment, just awareness, then release. This is harder than it sounds because the mind craves stimulation, but with repetition, it learns that not every thought gets center stage. There is power in becoming uninteresting to what once controlled you. When your attention is no longer accessible, manipulation fails. Emotional hooks go dull. External pressure loses leverage. You stop being predictable, and predictability is what gives others influence over your inner state. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you sovereign. It allows you to choose care instead of compulsive reaction. You still feel, but you don't bleed attention unnecessarily. You still engage, but on your terms. You become selective, and selectivity is strength. The calm that follows isn't emptiness, it's clarity. A mind that isn't constantly pulled outward becomes steady, focused, harder to shake. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to return to this state repeatedly, writing, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful than your own soul." But that peace requires guarding access. Not everything gets in. Each day, treat your attention like something valuable because it is. Protect it. Invest it deliberately. Withdraw it ruthlessly from what drains you. Over time, you'll notice something subtle but profound. The things that once felt powerful over you no longer have a voice in your inner world, not because they changed, because you did. And once attention is no longer accessible, control dissolves. Quietly. Completely. Number 9, power dynamics collapse. Power only exists where attention feeds it. The moment you stop caring in the way that makes you reactive, the entire structure holding that power together starts to wobble. Not because you fight it, not because you confront it, but because you quietly step out of the invisible agreement that kept you playing your role. You've been taught, subtly, to believe that power comes from force, status, or control. The Stoics saw it differently. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you always have the option of no opinion. That single line is a wrecking ball to unhealthy power dynamics. When you no longer grant emotional significance to approval, rejection, dominance, or threat, the hierarchy collapses on its own. You don't announce it. You don't explain yourself. You simply stop orienting your inner world around forces outside your control. And when that happens, the other side feels something unsettling. Their leverage has vanished. Power cannot survive without participation. The moment you withdraw your emotional investment, the game loses its rules. Most power dynamics persist because you're subtly chasing something: validation, certainty, reassurance, or even conflict. When you care too much, you signal dependency. Not weakness, but reliance. And reliance is readable. The Stoics warned against this trap relentlessly. Epictetus said that if you want to be invincible, make sure that nothing outside your own reason can disturb you. That's not poetic fluff. It's a practical strategy. When your mood, decisions, or sense of worth hinge on another person's reactions, you hand them a steering wheel to your inner life. But when you stop caring in the reactive sense, when you stop monitoring, interpreting, hoping, fearing, the balance shifts instantly. There is nothing to push against anymore. No emotional tension to exploit. No predictable response to provoke. You become internally unavailable to manipulation, and power dynamics require manipulation the way fire requires oxygen. Without it, they go cold. Here's the part most people miss. Not caring is not indifference, and it's not numbness. It's clarity. It's choosing where your energy goes with intention. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that suffering is often the currency power dynamics trade in. When you constantly anticipate outcomes, rehearse reactions, or replay mental loops, you inflate the other side's importance. You make them bigger than they are. But when you cut that loop, when you refuse to speculate, refuse to assign meaning, refuse to emotionally rehearse, you shrink the entire structure. Power doesn't announce its collapse with drama. It dissolves quietly. One day you notice that what once felt heavy now feels neutral. That's not loss. That's freedom. And freedom is always threatening to systems built on control. If you want to practice this shift, start internally, not externally. Don't change your words first. Change your attention. For the next 7 days, observe how often your mind reaches outward for permission to feel confident, calm, justified, or secure. Each time you notice it, pause, take a slow breath. Then remind yourself deliberately that your response is optional. Marcus Aurelius called this the discipline of assent. You don't have to accept every thought that appears. You don't have to react to every internal tug. Practice sitting with neutrality, not positive thinking, not forced detachment, just neutrality. Let sensations rise and fall without commentary. This is how power dynamics begin to starve. They can't hook into silence. Another exercise is subtraction, not adding affirmations or strategies, but removing habits that leak power. Stop explaining yourself internally. Stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. Stop assigning motives. Epictetus was blunt. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That line isn't about humiliation. It's about dropping the compulsive need to manage perception. The less you care about how you are interpreted, the less influence interpretation has over you. Practice this by letting moments pass without mental correction. No internal defense, no justification, no scorekeeping, just presence. Power dynamics thrive on friction. When friction disappears, there's nothing to grip. You'll notice something subtle as this becomes a habit. Your posture changes internally. Decisions feel quieter. You're no longer acting from urgency. You're acting from alignment. And alignment is unshakable because it doesn't need an audience. Seneca wrote that true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future. That's the endgame here. When you stop caring about outcomes you don't control, people, situations, and pressures lose their ability to rush you, corner you, or sway you. The power dynamic doesn't reverse. It evaporates. There's no winner and loser. There's just you standing on ground that no one else owns. If you want to deepen this, adopt a daily practice of voluntary emotional restraint. Once a day, choose not to react where you normally would. Not out of suppression, but out of choice. Feel the impulse fully, then let it pass without action. This trains you to experience intensity without surrendering agency. Over time, you'll realize that power was never taken from you. You were lending it out unconsciously. When you stop caring in the way that drains you, you don't become smaller. You become unreachable, calm, centered, self-directed. And in a world addicted to leverage and reaction, that kind of presence quietly ends every unhealthy power dynamic before it even begins. Number 10, you act from choice, not pressure. When you act from choice instead of pressure, something quiet but irreversible happens inside you. You stop moving on reflex. You stop jumping when the world snaps its fingers. You stop confusing urgency with importance. And in that space, small at first, almost unnoticeable, you begin to feel it. Your life is no longer being dragged forward by fear, expectation, or the need to please. It is being directed by you. This is where power quietly returns, not the loud, performative kind, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. Pressure thrives on reaction. It needs you hurried, emotionally stirred, slightly off balance. When you act under pressure, you're not really deciding anything, you're complying. You're choosing the fastest way to make discomfort stop. The Stoics warned about this long before modern life perfected it. Epictetus was blunt about it. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. What he was really saying is that the moment you stop letting external forces rush you, shame you, or corner you, you reclaim authorship. You move slower, you breathe, you decide. Pressure loses its grip when it realizes it can no longer steer you. Acting from choice means you pause long enough to hear yourself think. It means you notice the internal tightening, the urge to respond, to explain, to defend, to fix, and you don't obey it automatically. You let it pass. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That strength shows up the moment you stop asking, "What do they want from me right now?" and start asking, "What do I want to do given my values?" That shift alone dismantles the leverage others have over you. Because leverage only works when you're predictable. Choice is slower than pressure, and that's why it feels uncomfortable at first. Pressure gives you scripts. Choice demands clarity. It asks you to know what matters to you before you open your mouth or move your feet. It requires you to tolerate the uneasy silence where you're no longer reacting but not yet acting. This is where most people fold. They rush back into reaction because stillness feels like risk. But you're not meant to live as a bundle of reflexes. You're meant to live deliberately. Seneca put it simply, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Acting from choice is self-mastery in motion. When you choose instead of comply, you stop negotiating with your anxiety. You stop letting imagined consequences bully you into action. You realize that urgency is often artificial, manufactured to provoke a response before wisdom arrives. And wisdom always arrives late. It needs a moment, so you give it one. You learn to delay, not out of avoidance, but out of authority. You don't owe immediate reactions. You don't owe explanations in the heat of emotion. You don't owe access to your nervous system. That realization alone changes how you carry yourself. Your words become fewer. Your actions become cleaner. Your energy stops leaking. There's a strange relief in knowing you don't have to be pushed. When you act from choice, you're no longer trying to escape pressure. You're simply immune to it. You're not rebelling. You're not proving anything. You're just aligned. And alignment is calm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need permission. It moves when it's time and rests when it's not. That's why detachment and choice walk together. Detachment clears the noise. Choice fills the space with intention. This isn't about becoming passive. It's about becoming precise. Pressure makes everything feel urgent and equally important. Choice introduces hierarchy. Some things matter, most don't. You begin to act only when action serves your principles, not your discomfort. And yes, this will feel lonely at times. The Stoics were honest about that too. Choosing your own reason over the crowd's momentum often puts you out of sync. But Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." Acting from choice is how you begin to live on your own terms. To make this real, not just philosophical, start with small, deliberate practices. First, build the habit of the pause. Before responding to anything that triggers urgency, silently count 5 breaths. Not to calm down, but to create space. In that space, ask one question: is this a choice or a reaction? You don't need the perfect answer. You just need to interrupt the reflex. Over time, that pause becomes automatic. Pressure starts arriving to a locked door. Second, practice voluntary delay. When something demands immediate action, decide consciously to wait, even briefly. A few minutes, an hour, a day. This trains your nervous system to tolerate unresolved tension without collapsing into action. Seneca advised this kind of training when he wrote about rehearsing discomfort so it wouldn't control you. Delay isn't weakness. It's proof that you can hold your ground without explanation. Third, clarify your non-negotiables. Choice is impossible without values. Write down 3 principles you refuse to violate no matter the pressure. Not outcomes, principles. Things like integrity, self-respect, or clarity. When pressure shows up, measure it against those. If it doesn't align, you already have your answer. This removes drama from decision-making. You're not choosing in the moment, you chose long ago. Fourth, rehearse refusal internally, not out loud, in your mind. Imagine yourself not responding, not reacting, not adjusting. Feel the discomfort rise and fall. This is Stoic negative visualization turned inward, not to fear loss, but to desensitize yourself to pressure. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from events, but from judgments. Rehearsal weakens the judgment that you must act to be okay. Over time, you'll notice something subtle. The world stops leaning on you so hard, not because it changed, but because you did. You no longer broadcast urgency in your posture or tone. You no longer move like someone who can be rushed. And people, situations, even your own impulses adapt. Power shifts quietly, without confrontation, without announcement. Acting from choice is not about control over others. It's about sovereignty over yourself. When you stop being pressure-driven, you become principle-driven. And principles don't panic, they wait. They endure, they decide. This is what it means to live uncornered, to move through life without being yanked by invisible strings, to stop caring about pressure and start caring about alignment. When you do, the power you were chasing finally stops running. It was waiting for you to choose it all along. When you stop caring, something strange happens, the noise fades. The manipulation loses its grip. The need for validation disappears. Detachment isn't weakness, it's clarity. It's the moment you reclaim your time, your energy, and your self-respect. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not every reaction is required, and not every battle is worth fighting. If this message resonated, sit with it, apply it quietly. Let your actions speak where words once did. And remember, the less you chase, the more control you regain. Stay disciplined. Stay detached. I'll see you in the next one.